Hello, my friends. Hello, and welcome once again to Stately Von Manor, where Roger and I have returned for a Bookshelf Essentials episode today. Bookshelf Essentials, a series of videos that was originally created by David Wiley over on his amazing channel, and some other booktubers such as myself have taken up doing some Bookshelf Essential videos of our own. And today's Bookshelf Essential is a special one because it ties into Rocket Summer, which starts today. Rocket Summer, a fantastic booktube event, if I do say so myself. It has a bunch of great co-hosts. I'll link them all down below so you can check out their channels. But the Bookshelf Essential, which I am talking about today, a Bookshelf Essential, of course, is a book that is essential to your personal library, a book that you would not get rid of under any circumstances. And I have a book like that here, and that is this one. This is the Science Fiction Encyclopedia. It's a science fiction encyclopedia that was published in 1979. This was published a while ago. It was republished in another edition after that, which was expanded, although it didn't have the really cool illustrations that this one has. This one is fully illustrated. There are a bunch of really great photos and illustrations in this edition. But the edition, I believe, that came out after this, and I don't know what year that was published, that didn't have those. And the Science Fiction Encyclopedia still exists. I believe it's called the SF Encyclopedia now, and it's online. So you can find this online as a website. But they didn't have that back in 1979. It was just a book back then, this book, and it's fantastic. And you can say, hey, this was 1979. That makes this reference book of yours pretty out of date. And yes, this is pretty out of date. That's why I like it. Roger and I, we like things that are old and out of date. This was published, of course, at the very tail end of the 70s. And it is perfect for Rocket Summer, my reading event that's going on right now, which is about classic science fiction. And as far as the reading event goes, classic science fiction lasted through the 1960s when the new wave hit, right in the middle of the 1960s, and altered science fiction forever. And this is a great volume because it chronicles that entire period through a bunch of great entries about authors and other things. It's really interesting. So it's got some different types of entries in this. And the first type of entry is authors. This has a ton of science fiction authors that you can look up in this book. All of the early 20th century and mid-20th century science fiction authors, you won't find them all, but you'll find a lot of them in here, including a bunch of science fiction authors that are probably forgotten now. So a lot of science fiction authors are in this. It also has themes. Science fiction themes are listed in here as entries. We also have films. There are 286 film entries in here. We have magazines. They have entries on the major science fiction magazines, such as Astounding Science Fiction, and many other magazines. Illustrators of science fiction, editors. They've got critical entries, filmmakers, publishers, pseudonyms, television programs. And it has a ton. There's a ton that they packed in here. This isn't gigantic. It is 672 pages long, but triple columned. Here's an entry right there on H. Rider Haggard. And this is just a wonderful book. It is the ultimate reference for classic science fiction, and it is out of date in a lot of ways, but like I said, I like that. And it's interesting because this came out at the end of the 70s, and it is very much a product of its time, and you can sense that in some of the entries. Many of the entries in here are very opinionated, There are some strong opinions held by the authors of the entries. This was edited by Peter Nicholls, excuse me. Peter Nicholls edited this. But there were a number of authors who contributed, and there are the contributors there. And it also has a checklist of themes. The themes I was talking about that are entries in here. Themes such as technology, terraforming, pollution is a theme, immortality, invasion, invisibility is a theme that's covered, lost worlds, religion, robots, transportation, under the sea. I mean, there's all kinds of themes that you can look up in here. A lot of themes that, a lot of us wouldn't think of looking up, but you can find them in this book. And it's pretty cool. And of course, for me, one of the most important things about this book is the entries on science fiction authors. Because a lot of those classic science fiction authors that you come across their paperbacks when you're buying the old science fiction paperbacks, or you find stories and anthologies for authors that you might not know from the past. This is great because it has entries on all those authors, or most of them anyway. And it's interesting. Like I said, it was a product of its time. And you can see that on the entry for Harlan Ellison. There's old Harlan Ellison there. Harlan Ellison is a very important writer of SF and speculative fiction. I think he's won more awards than any other author, science fiction author or otherwise. I mean, he won a ton of awards, Harlan Ellison did. And he hasn't been forgotten, but he's been almost forgotten until very recently. Very recently, there has been published a brand new anthology of his stories, long-awaited anthology, the best of Harlan Ellison, I think it is. And that's great. I think major publishers stopped dealing with Harlan Ellison just because he was so difficult to deal with. But now he's dead and they don't have to deal with him anymore. But for a long time, like I said, he wasn't entirely forgotten, but he was almost forgotten, I think, by many. But if you look in this book, published in 1979 when Harlan Ellison was still going strong, very long entry, much longer than you'll normally find on many authors in this book. He has a whole, well, it ends up being a page and a half because it goes on to the next page. And that's almost as much space as Isaac Asimov gets. And so this was published at a time when Harlan Ellison was a big deal. Hopefully he will become a big deal again. Very important author, Harlan Ellison. But that was interesting. I found that interesting when I looked in there. And as I said, some of the entries in here are kind of opinionated, let's say. Like there's an entry, of course, for Star Trek. Star Trek, the television show, has an entry. And of course, at this time, there was only one Star Trek, and that was Star Trek, the original series. And so it's talking about the original series in this book. And it seems like the people who put this book together couldn't figure out why Star Trek was so popular. As it says here, reasons for this almost fanatical following, the large following for Star Trek, are not clear. It has been suggested that the cozy family unit presented in the series was attractive to adolescents. But it is more likely that the answer lies with the ambiguous sexuality of Spock, particularly as most of the show's most ardent fans are female. Yeah, that's why Star Trek is popular. Not because it was a great show or anything. And it goes on. It goes on about it. It's like the formula of the show seldom varied. Many adult viewers came to feel that the series suffered from a blandness resulting from the repetition of plot ideas, the clumsiness of the scientific elements, the trite moralizing, and the effort to please all viewers and offend none by the inclusion of a token Russian, token Asiatic, and the person of actress Nicholls, who played Uhura, a token black and token woman in one package. All these characters behaved in a traditional white Anglo-Saxon Protestant manner. Only Spock was a truly original creation. Wow. So yeah, you can tell this was written in 1979. And it has to be said, you know, we might forget it now, but at this time, there was still a lot of snobbery when it came to Star Trek. Now it is a beloved show and is thought quite highly in science fiction, among science fiction fans. But at the time, a lot of people loved the show, but a lot of the more serious, you know, SF readers wanted to distance themselves from something as childish as Star Trek. So you have that attitude in here. Obviously, a lot of what is said in that article is BS, but, you know, that's the kind of stuff you find in here, which is interesting because it really places this volume at the time when it was produced. And so a lot of the attitudes of the people who were putting this volume together were preserved for us to, you know, enjoy and occasionally laugh at now when we read it. However, it is a very, very informative volume. And there's a lot of great stuff in here. I mean, there's some solid entries, very informative entries on all of the things that I've mentioned. So many authors, like I said, that have been forgotten or not very often thought about are very prominent in this volume. I don't know how easy it is to stumble across this now. I was very lucky to find this first edition. I found it actually in a little free library just a few blocks away from the manor. And I found it in one of those little free libraries, you know. And the one I found it at, it was remarkable because usually it has the most boring books that you would never want to read ever. But then I found this in there one day and it was really kind of surprising. And what a wonderful surprise. And I definitely will be using it a lot for Rocket Summer. It's just such a fascinating and entertaining book. It's one of those books that is just, you know, it's great just to thumb through, not just to look things up, but, you know, when you have some free time, just to go through this thing. And like I said, I love that I have the first edition, not only because, you know, it's the one that came out first and it's got all the classic stuff in it, but it has all of these great illustrations in it as well. So many great photographs and illustrations. There's Doctor Who. There's Doctor Who. Very different time for Doctor Who back in the 70s, but there's the fourth Doctor himself. All kinds of great stuff in here. And yeah, it's great. There's a Buck Rogers strip from the Buck Rogers entry there. What a great book. If you ever find this thing, pick it up. It's well worth it. Or you can just get the modern version and read it online if you need to look something up, because that is, you know, absolutely for free up there as a website. But I love this book. I love this book, and it is absolutely a bookshelf essential. Okay, guys, I will catch you next time.